but why we're all here tonight. It's an honor to have Mr. Doug Palladini in the room. We always kick off the snow conference with an endemic member of the community that has really helped shape where snowboarding is these days. We've had the honor of having Brad Stewart join us and share some amazing insights in years past. And tonight, I'm honored to have Doug, who not only he was the first employee at Snowboarder magazine before going on to become the publisher of Skateboarder, Surfer, and brings a broad array of vision across action sports that really gives shape to a vision of where we need to be, not only as snowboarding, but as tastemakers, as brands, as an industry that is in a time of fluctuation and self-introspection. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Doug Palladini, Vans VP of Global Marketing, to share what's next for the industry.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Steffi changes for me. Thanks. Good evening. How is everybody? Good. Thank you for being here. There's a couple thank yous that I'd like to do first. Can you put it in the mode so I can see everything? Thanks. There's a few thank yous I'd like to do first. The first thank you is to everybody at TransWorld who takes the time and energy to put on this conference. So Mike and Adam and Ferg and the whole crew from TransWorld, thank you guys for doing this. And this slide is up here the slide of the Snowboarder magazine is up here for a reason. The reason is because when I was running the mag, we weren't allowed to come to this conference. And so ironic that now I'm sitting here asked to give the keynote speech to a conference I wasn't allowed at not that long ago. It was crazy. We used to throw some shit. It was fun. But to see that TransWorld has taken on the responsibility of educating the entire industry, I think is a statement towards their leadership. At Vans, I'll tell you, the people that we work with that are here will tell you that we pride ourselves in opening up the whole industry to everything that we do. If you come to the US Open this summer, for example, in Huntington, you'll see a good example of that. If you go to the East Coast Surfing Championships in Virginia Beach, you'll see a good example of that. We lead by welcoming the whole clan, the whole tribe in, and that's something that Steve Van Doren taught us and has run the company with for a long time. And so it's nice to see TransWorld pick that up. And having been sitting at my desk when the entire industry was up at the TransWorld thing and I couldn't even talk to anybody, it's good to be here now. So thank you very much for having me. Yeah, TransWorld crew, thanks. So the other thanks I have is to the people who have been around snowboarding longer than I have. And you guys know we're at a point now where we're starting to lose some of them, right? So we had the very sad passing of Tom Sims this year, which was tough for a lot of people, myself included. So I would just want to say thank you to people like Brad and Dennis and anybody in this room who started snowboarding before 1989. Could you please stand up? So thank you to you guys for everything that you've done. You know, these are the people who just stood up are the people who set the table for me and then gave me the opportunity to progress the ball forward for my time and then pass it on to the next crew. And it's an honor to have those people here tonight to talk, and makes me a little nervous, actually, to be honest. But I'll move forward anyway. And the TransWorld guys are probably sick of seeing the snowboarder slide up there anyway. All right, so listen, I'm not going to talk about what's next. I have no idea what's next. Nobody in this room has any idea what's next, right? Nobody can stand here and prognosticate about what is coming next, right? So I'm right in the middle of South by Southwest down in Austin. So the first week of it is interactive and the second week of it is music. And this is my one night to get away and come up and hang out with the snowboarding crew, which I'm thankful for. But I got to listen to this guy this week, Nate Silver. How many of these people know who Nate Silver is? Close. If Nate Silver was here, he could tell you what's next. Nate Silver is the guy who accurately predicted the senatorial winners in all 50 states and the president with the closest vote count of anybody in the world, and has done so for 2 election cycles now. This guy's a genius. He comes from baseball. He comes from a world where you follow stats to learn what players are about. You guys saw Moneyball? That's how this guy thinks. He's a pretty incredible guy. If you don't know who Nate Silver is, please put it in your phone. You're going to want to look up. He has a book out you should read. It's pretty incredible stuff. But he could tell you what's next. I can't tell you what's next. What I can do is I can share with you guys a little bit of what I've learned about how to set up our industry for the future, and what sort of business principles, what sort of overarching strategies make the most sense. And I'm trying to think about this from the standpoint of everybody in the room, okay? So I've had the fortune to be able to see from the media side, from the agency side, from the brand side, and we're a retailer too, from the retailer side, how the industry works. And that's what I'm hoping I can share with you guys a little bit. So what's next? That's probably a little beyond my ability to do, but I will do my best to share with you some of what I've learned along the way. I'm going to start with creativity. The number one thing I would tell you, if you only take away one thing from my talk tonight, write down that creativity matters. And creativity matters not only for everybody in this room, creativity matters for your CFO. Creativity matters for the person who runs human resources for you. Creativity matters for the kid who packs boxes in the warehouse for you. Creativity is what fuels our industry. And not just our industry, creativity is what fuels every industry on the planet. Read this for a minute. Big study of people who lead the Fortune 500 businesses. They went out and talked to the presidents, the CEOs of these companies. What did they say? What do you want to see in your employees? What do you want to see in the leaders of your company? The number one attribute that these Fortune 500 leaders want to see is creativity. The single most important leadership competency for enterprises seeking a pass through the complexity that we're dealing with. You guys know what kind of complexity we're dealing with in snowboarding. You're going to hear, starting with Kelly tomorrow, you're going to hear in granular detail all the complexity you're dealing with. You guys know it. You live it every day, right? If you manage a sales force, you know what I'm talking about. If you're a retailer, you know what I'm talking about. If you run a brand, you know what I'm talking about, okay? Creativity is what fuels that. So the old thinking is that creativity is what the marketing dudes do, right? And I've had some bosses that have said that to me, because that's on my business card. There's been a marketing thing there for quite some time. But creativity is what needs to fuel our business across the entire enterprise going forward. How do you apply that? That is what the consumer expectation is, that you are going to exceed their expectations along the way, every step of the way. That requires creativity. So I'd ask you guys to think about how you apply creative thinking to all aspects of your business. Think about the way you sell your product. Think about the way you sell to a consumer on the sales floor in your shop. That you need to employ creativity in everything that you do. Look what the Fortune 500 CEOs are saying about the value of this. They're teaching this now. When you go to the Wharton Business School, when you go to Northwestern, when you go to Harvard, they're teaching these MBA candidates now about creativity. That's what we're going to trade in going forward, and I think that's what potentially can lift all action sports, especially snowboarding. Second rule. All right, I thought I'd start by pissing people off. I'm quite good at it. Done them throughout my entire career. Sell direct. The consumer expectation, your fans, the fans of your store, the fans of your brand, they expect you to sell direct. I'm sorry, that wall is down. If you today are living in a world where you think that you can live without direct selling, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Again, my opinion, but I'll tell you, again, I've just been in front of people who are way smarter than I'll ever be, hundreds of them at South by, and I'll tell you, if you don't sell direct, you're missing the boat, okay? You know this is where it's going. You need a strategy to sell direct, no matter what you do. If you're a brand, if you're a retailer, no matter what you do, you need a strategy to sell direct. That is the consumer expectation. Okay, you have to meet and exceed expectations of consumers to win. You have to sell direct. Get your head around it. It's happening. If you're not doing it, you're missing the boat. Okay, you can all tell me I'm a dick after, but I had to get that out there. I think that's super important. I will balance that with my next thing. Sell indie. These are not opposing forces. These forces work together. And let me talk about what I mean when I say sell indie. So this is Seattle Snowboard Connection. This is my example that I use a lot of what I love about a snowboarding shop. Now, everybody's got a good example, your own store or a store that you built your store after or a store that you go into. There's those stores around the country that you love. And John Logic and I go way back, so I always love this example. Selling indie is about supporting the people who truly understand the cultural identity of snowboarding, okay? Because you're talking to a consumer who was willing to pay for that experience. That's where the loyalty comes from. It comes from not showrooming in your store and then going on Amazon and finding the shit as cheap as possible, right? Everybody's dealing with that, right? Everybody knows the concept of showrooming at this point. If you don't, you better Google it because it's happening. It's happening to your brands in your key retailers' stores right now. These kids are coming in, spending hours in there, and then saying, okay, I'm thinking about it. I got to ask my mom, and then going home and looking it up on Amazon and buying it cheap as possible. That's not cool. That's not going to help our business ever. That's a race to the bottom. That's a Britney Spears album. Okay? That is absolutely as bad as it can get. When you sell indie, what you're doing is you're making a decision to support the accounts that actually understand our culture. These are the employees who ride a lot and know what they're selling. These are the employees who are able to actually wax and tune a board properly. These are the employees who will get full markup for the board or the binding or the boot because they know what they're doing, okay? And I think it's very, very important, no matter what happens, that we support selling indie. I do not think that if you sell direct, you can't support indie. Like I said before, I do think that these are forces marshaled together, make all our brands stronger. But I do think that selling indie is critical. And I would ask you guys to think about, especially the guys on the brand side, I'd ask you to think about where are the shops in this country that have put in the time, put in the energy to do it right. Those are the shops that deserve your over spend, okay? You want to spend more money in those shops to support those retailers because they're the ones who ultimately own the culture of our sport. It's true in surfing, it's true in skateboarding, it's true in snowboarding. And I think that's massively important. So, and if there's questions, you can ask me at the end. You can disagree with me too. I'm fine with argument. Right, Pete? Cool. The fourth principle I would like to talk about is knowing your consumer. And I'll just put this photo up because I think this says it all. Guess what, guys? This is your consumer. These are cute little girls out with their brand new snowboards, outerwear, goggles, boots, bindings for a fun day of snowboarding. Your consumer is not just the kid learning rodeo flips in the park all day long. Why as an industry do we continue to ignore this kid? But this is the kid where the business can grow. These are the young kids, boys and girls. I put girls up here for a reason because I know most of you guys, when you think about the kid you want to market to, you're not thinking about this little girl on the snowboard, but you should because this is the future of our sport. You've all heard the concept of the lifetime value of a customer, right? You have to start that at a young age. What are you doing to grow the sport? What are you doing to know these kids? I've seen some great programs out there that help build snowboarding. Okay, but there aren't enough of them. There aren't enough of them out there. There's not enough people riding. There's people who now use the economy and the weather and how busy they are. I heard it on the tram coming up here today from the guys sitting behind me. There's so many reasons not to ride. These are the kids you have to know. These are the stoked kids who love snowboarding like we used to before we got all jaded and waited for the best days, right? You remember that? You remember when you just go ride any time because it was so fucking epic? So these kids are living that. So don't forget them. You know, the mags and the movies, they do a great job of fueling that hero worship, right? Which is an important part of our sport, for sure. But don't forget about the little stoked kids. Those are the ones, I think, that can really help build the long-term value of snowboarding. Is it this quiet because you guys are bored or because you're listening? All right. Okay, thank you for saying that. There you go. So number five is different than know your consumer. It's own your consumer. Now I'm taking it a step farther. Now what I'm saying is you actually have to know the kids who are paying full pop for your product. If I went around to all the brands in snowboarding and asked them to identify kids that they know who paid full retail for the product, most of the people who worked at those brands couldn't name one person. And I'll tell you, Vans, this wasn't a real epiphany for me. So I'm not talking like my shit doesn't stink, because we went through the same exact thing and just finished the largest research study in the history of our company to better understand our consumers as a result, because we just realized we didn't. Our culture prides itself on its gut instinct. We know what's best, right? Because we live it every day. That's who we are, right? We're in it. We're immersed in this world. And so we live it every day, and our gut instinct is so valid and such an important part of what we do, but that's not it. You actually have to get outside and go meet these kids who are paying full retail for your product and know who they are as well. You have to know who's actually buying your stuff. If I call up X brand tomorrow and say, I'd like to talk to 50 consumers who have bought X snowboard from you in the past 30 days, could you please just send me their names, email addresses, zip codes? I just want to get a feel for ages, gender. I just want to get a feel for who these people are. I'd like to talk to them. Just say hi, find out how their experience was. You're going to hear crickets on the other end of the phone. Why is that? Why would you not want to actually form a true long-term relationship with the people that are shopping your products or shopping in your stores? I hope you guys will really give this some thought. I think this is a transformative power for our brands, and something that I'll tell you that I feel like is a competitive advantage for Vans that I really hope our peers pick up on as well. These people are so in the know. They are so communicative with one another. Why wouldn't you want to be a part of that communication? I just threw up a random stat. You guys know how many thousands of Pew Research bar graphs do you guys see all the time when you see interesting stories like, oh, I just got an email from somebody, you should read this story about how many kids are going to have smartphones. These are everywhere, right? They're pervasive. But think about what it's actually telling you. What it's actually telling you is that the amount of connectivity among consumers is what's going to fuel our future. Okay? Don't think about the device anymore. Think about what these people are saying to each other. Because whether they're on a phone or a tablet or a laptop or a desktop, they're going to be talking to each other, and they're talking to each other about the things that they're really passionate about. And guess what? Snowboarding is one of those things. Snowboarding is one of those things. And if they're talking about you, you want to know what that is. You want to know what they're saying. You want to take part in it. You want to know these consumers. You want to know the people who are paying full retail for your product. Lesson number 6. Stop selling, start storytelling. If I could brag about one thing that Vans does that I am particularly proud of, it's storytelling. Now, we really benefit from a 47-year history. This brand was founded in 1966, the year I was born. This brand has so much history before I ever got a chance to even step foot in the door that it's like being a kid in a candy store to tell all the stories at Vans. You guys might have new brands. You might have fewer stories to tell, but do less selling and do more storytelling. And I'm going to show you guys some great examples of that. Does anybody in this room have the Wantful app on their iPad? Okay. Does anybody have an iPad? Raise your hand if you have an iPad. All right. If you have an iPad, when you get home tonight, put the Wantful app on there. This is the future of selling by storytelling. The Wantful app basically will only feature a small handful of products from a retailer or brand you've never heard of before, but it will do it in such a beautiful way It has nothing to do about selling you anything, and yet you'll feel like you want to buy something. Why? Because they tell great stories. This is a boyfriend and girlfriend who started a cool little skateboard company, like remaking vintage skateboards in Brooklyn. And whether you like the boards or not, if you're a skater, you may think they're not the best boards, whatever. It doesn't matter. The story is so cool, that they're going to sell stuff. They're only selling 4 or 5 things, but the story is so powerful that's allowing them to connect with consumers. And they built this entire app around these brands who can do effective storytelling. All right? I'll share an example with you guys. It's a 6-minute video. It's a little long for a video for a presentation, but in terms of storytelling, it's what I like to think that we all have the capacity to do inside all of our companies. So I'll share that with you guys here. And hopefully it'll be loud enough.
Wow. Just thinking of what my dad must have been going through in his mind when he was 16 years old. Dropped out of school, not finishing 8th grade, going to the racetrack, trying to make a living at the racetrack, and my grandmother drags him down to the shoe factory. Started off sweeping floors and cleaning places, had a revelation, decided to start his own shoe company. And what time has passed has been something that our family could only dream about. Remember when we first got our building in 1965? All the machinery coming by land, by sea. 5 kids, we were up pitching in, painting the walls, putting it all together one piece at a time. A year later, opened up and made their very first pair of vans. Lots of hard work, lots of great people, and I guess a dream. I just had a dream.
I mean, skateboarding was so under the radar of mainstream, we were just our own little thing. So you really held on to things that were for you. Skateboarders are developing skateboarding, Vans shoes were the tools on our feet to develop it. So they've just grown together. And they've been there from the start, and that hasn't changed.
They've always told me just to stay true to what I want and to just live the lifestyle that I want. I just gotta stay true to what I'm doing.
Well, I think if a brand gives you the freedom to be yourself, that just shows that they care about you. It's a catch-22 when it comes to a company, when you're trying to start out and make a product and become successful, and that success can steer who you're trying to please. If you keep the core and you keep that heart and that faith and that belief system of what you stand for, people will see that and admire that. People really respect loyalty.
Because we're in a business where you're told one thing and then the next day it turns into something else, you have certain people that you believe in. You have certain people that you rely on. You have certain people that you know that you can count on.
When you're stripped of everything you've got, you find out who your real friends are and who your family is.
I mean, our company has that family value, and the family value that we have, it's not based on what can I get, it's based on what can I give. I mean, Steve Van Dorn is like a brother. You know, he was the guy that I used to go to get one shoe at a time. He was the guy that basically believed in my ability as a skateboarder, but also that my heart as a human being was in a good place.
There are individuals, there are creative people, and they need to be able to celebrate them. And Vans allows you to be an individual, and they will celebrate you. I think everybody feels as though that's part of the reason why we've been so successful. We're successful in business because we haven't sold out. They see the authenticity, they want to be part of it.
But it's been so wonderful seeing what's happened over the last 46 years, from the very first pair, the very first factory, to where we are today, selling our shoes in over 170 countries and having riders all over the world, salespeople all over the world. That dream 46 years ago is still alive. Spirit of the people are all still there.
All right. So when you think about selling, think about transactions. Think about actually ringing the cash register. But when you think about what you actually want to do with your brand, and I'm talking about whether your brand sells $1 million in stuff a year or it sells $1 billion in stuff a year, it doesn't matter. Think about storytelling instead. So like I said, sometimes I feel it's a little unfair when you have that kind of story to tell. It predates all of us who work at the brand, with the exception of Steve and his family. But you all don't have that kind of history, but you all are in this business because you have a story to tell. You wouldn't be here otherwise. You wouldn't care as much as you do about trying to build a business inside of something you love, like snowboarding. Okay? You all have that story to tell. So keep sales separate. Think about sales as it's that end. It's where you take the card and you swipe it and you hand someone a receipt. That's selling. What we need to do as an industry, in my humble belief, is storytell. Okay? All right. Stand for something. This goes hand in hand with storytelling. Interesting story about the Vans Legends. When I came to Vans in 2004, we didn't treat our legends very well. Cab loves to tell me the story of the time he got the call from somebody who didn't know any better at Vans saying they weren't going to really, support the skateboarders anymore back in the dark days in the early 90s. And that's good to remember. But what we came to realize, and one of the paths to our success over the past decade, has been embracing what it is that we stand for. And one of the things that Vans stands for is the history of skateboarding. And so at the time, in the mid-2000s, it wasn't that cool to have the old dudes on your team. They were over it. The kids didn't even know, right? The young kids, they didn't even know who Alva was. But by embracing the legends and helping to show how powerful they are, Hosoi, Cab, Alva, Grosso, the people who helped build our brand, right? The people who gave the backbone to what snowboarding is today. A lot of you guys all grew up with the same crew here, worshiping them. It wasn't until we really embraced them and said, no, these are legends. These guys are the next level, that we really started to understand the power of what Vans could be, because that's what we stand for, and we're okay with that. So know what you stand for. Be able to say very clearly in one sentence between floors on the elevator what it is that your brand stands for. If your brand's mission statement is going to be a bunch of words that fill up this entire slide right here with words and punctuation and grammar that's been beaten to death, you don't have a good enough succinct statement. You need to be very clear about what you stand for. And it's such a codifying kind of focusing event once you really get to this. And this enables all the youth too. Don't be, if you're a brand that has some history, embrace it. Don't be shy about it. Embrace it. Hold it up for what it is. So many brands kind of shy away from their history because they think the average kid in the store doesn't care or doesn't know. That's bullshit. They totally care. And that builds so much power and strength and authenticity for your brand when you share that. But make sure you stand for something. Grow organic. I talk about this one quite a bit. This is the boardroom in Vancouver. If you haven't been there, it's kind of on a marquee snowboard shop street in Van. When you grow organic, you make a decision to fully support the key partners in every city that you want to sell your products in. And you overinvest. So it kind of goes back to what the thing I said earlier about sell indie. Grow organic and sell indie really go there. So what Vans does is we identify who we're going to invest in, who are our key partners we're going to build long-term business with, and that's where we overspend. We overspend against those accounts that really are our true partners. Do you guys know who your true partners are? Have you identified the accounts? Have you identified the business partners that you have to be successful, that are make or break for you? And do you actually consciously spend more of your time, energy, and resources with those people and those other companies than you would? You should be. You should really be thinking about who you want to spend your energy on. I see a lot of chickens with their heads cut off at SIA because you're thinking about, I've got a number to meet, I have this much I have to repay, I need this many orders in order to be able to place my orders with the factory. No matter what part of the business, and you guys know what I'm talking about, right? You have that day-to-day mentality that's always running back here in the back of your head. But at the forefront in your mind, I believe, should be, how am I going to grow my business organically and with whom? So I don't care if that's your printing vendor. I don't care if that's your factor. I don't care if that's the guy that washes your car on the weekends. Who is going to grow your business for you? Who are the real partners that you need to be successful? Spend more time, more money, more people power with them. We see it all the time, right? You see it all the time where you see the sales force and they went out and they visited this account and this account and this account and this account. Okay, you visited 5 accounts. But if you would have spent the whole day with the one account, would that have been more valuable than dividing up your time? We call it spreading the bread with the 1 teaspoon of peanut butter and seeing how many pieces of bread you can cover with a teeny amount of peanut butter. I'm saying no, do the opposite. Pick 1 or 2 pieces of bread and put more peanut butter on them. That's all I'm saying. When you do that, you create organic growth. So a lot, when you guys hear about Vans results, comes from that organic growth. We are not expanding our door count. We are not expanding our distribution. Our growth is coming from further support of our key partners for our business. And I think no matter what business you're in, if you apply some of that thinking to, look, we define strategy in our company as the intelligent allocation of limited resources. We can all get our heads around that one, right? Strategy is the intelligent allocation of limited resources. We all have limits. GE has limits to what it can do, right? Coke does. It's how you apply those resources that's the difference between success or failure in our industry. Number 9 is to say no. One of the hardest lessons up here is to say no. Why? Because it's the same thing. The intelligent allocation of limited resources requires us to say no. The shining example of saying no is Steve Jobs. I cannot make it through a presentation without talking about Steve Jobs, definitely somebody who's had a major influence on my career and how I think about business is Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs, on his second tour of duty coming back to Apple, came into the company. If you've read the book, you know the story. Came into the company, and he looked at he had them set up a room, and they lined up everything they made, right? And he said, guess what? We're only doing 4 of these things. There was an audible gasp in the room. People were like, oh, there's no way, you can't do that. Imagine if you worked at Burton Snowboards and you lined up every board for a season and had to pick the 4 that you were going to actually focus your selling energy on for the season. How gnarly would that discussion be? Imagine Apple having to line everything up and then nail it down to 4 things. That's what Steve Jobs did. But what he learned through the process was that saying no generated as much business for his company and was more of a source of pride for their brand than all the things you can say yes to. We work in an industry that is idea rich. We're creative people. There's always something cool popping. And now with the interactive realm, man, you guys know this every day. You can't even, you're the hamster on the wheel trying to keep up with it all the time. What does that do? That just spreads your resources without any strategy behind them at all. Learn how to say no. Focus on the things that are most important to your business and say no more than you say yes. That really tight filter will allow your company to focus and grow your business. And I'll throw in one bonus one here to end for you guys, a 9.5. Be natives, not immigrants. And I'm not being racist. My father came on the boat from Italy. I'm an immigrant. I'm from an immigrant family. This is a quote from this guy, who is also an immigrant. This is one of the smartest people at Google. And I got to hear him speak down in Dana Point at a Wall Street Journal conference a couple weeks ago. And when he put this out there, I didn't really understand it at first. And then he talked about it, and I thought about it, and I realized what a brilliant statement it is. And this is how you need to think about, in my estimation, this is how you should be thinking about the interactive realm and the kids with all their computers and apps and all this shit we have a hard time even understanding anymore, okay? These kids are natives. We're the immigrants. The people sitting in this room right here, we're the immigrants. Do you know what? Why? We immigrated to this technology, you know? I had the TV with the freaking antenna on top. Where I know you guys aren't as old as me, so there's some young guys in here who may not understand that. The rabbit ears, whatever. Brad, do you remember the rabbit ears? Thank you. Okay, so you all have that. You all have one idea about being an immigrant, right? You remember the first time you got on the web. You remember the first time you sent an email, right? Everybody in this room has probably used a fax, right? So you've all converted from something else. You're an immigrant to this new technology. But you're selling your products to natives. The natives are untethered. They are completely unwired. They never used a payphone and they never will. And you guys know all the stories. You see the things on the internet like, if you were born in 1977, you know, and that'll make you feel old really fast. So what Nikesh was saying is that we, in order to succeed for the next generation, need to think like natives. Okay, and there's always tons of great examples out there. I'm going to share one with you that just I saw a couple weeks ago that just frankly, just absolutely blew my mind. All right, do I just click on this? We're going to hop over to the internet. So what does that tell us? That tells us that if you use a mouse, all right, can you just go past this? Yes. All right. That tells you that if you use a mouse, that you're an immigrant. You're not a native. That band, guys, that wasn't some like Caltech shit that you're going to see 5 years from now. That band goes on sale this fall. All right. That band means you're going to be able to use the motion in your hand and your arm to control. So Kinect, you guys all know the Kinect video game thing. This is absolutely the next level from that. Is just this basic band that's reading the sensor from your body to move what you want to move. Your body becomes a remote control. Have you guys seen the demos for the new Google glasses? Right? The heads-up display. So from now on, your heads-up display is just going to be a part of your life. Okay, it's going to be built all around you. So again, take the device away. Don't start talking about smartphones and tablets. The machines don't matter. Think about actually, you're just going to be able to enable technology all around you by your own motion in your body, and what that means. So the message there is, you guys, be thinking about 3 steps ahead, because we're a youth culture driven company, a brand, right? Our business, our entire industry is driven by youth culture. These are the natives. Don't be an immigrant. Don't let your company be an immigrant when you're selling to natives. You guys need to be native. So I'm at South by. I'm always looking around for people I know in the room. I looked at the total list of brands at the Interactive. I couldn't find another brand from this industry in the thing. Stuart from Zoomies told me that he had a couple people there. So I don't know, there may have been a couple other people I missed, but for the most part, I don't know how on top of it as an industry we are in really adopting the philosophy of being natives in this world. So I'll just leave you guys with the Proust quote up here that I think says how I believe that the next 2 days should really be approached, that we aren't seeking a new landscape, right? You guys look out at the mountains and you get that immediate feeling and you know you're in the right place, okay? Snowboarding is what it is for a reason, okay? It's fueled all of us to want to actually follow careers in this business because we believe that the mountains and the act of riding sideways down the mountains is a pretty fulfilling experience, right? What we have to do is we have to look through new eyes at how to reach and engage that next generation of kids that so that they can feel like we did when we were coming up. Thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't know.
Yeah, thanks so much, Doug. That was really inspiring. And one of the coolest things I heard in there was from the video that you showed, your guys' reliance on your heritage and the ability to tell that story, but at the same time to be able to listen to the next generation. And you talked about owning your consumer. How do you go about doing that and understanding what they want from Vans as a brand, but at the same time growing it organically to meet their needs, but to make sure that they dovetail with who Vans is?
Yeah, so I would say that there's probably no better time, and you have so many free tools at your disposal than you've ever had before. You could pay a lot of outside brands, spend a lot of money to help you figure that out. There's a lot of vendors out there selling all kinds of snake oil to help you guys figure it out. But remember I talked at the beginning about your gut and our instinct and how important that is to our industry, always remaining close. You want to go out and listen yourself. You have so many tools, right? Does anybody have TweetDeck on their iPhone or their iPad? TweetDeck allows you to put any search term you want in a bar and immediately follow in real time what people are saying about that specific search term. So that's free. That's a free app that at least you would be able to understand what people are saying about your brand. That's a first step. Facebook. Everybody's got a Facebook page because you heard that's what you had to do, and you're counting up how many likes you got, okay? But how often are the people in your company talking to the people who have liked your brand? It blows my mind when I talk to people sometimes that they've never actually thought to do that. It's cool that, like, man, we got past 100,000 likes. That's awesome. How many of those people have you talked to? So Vans, Vans just passed 10.6 million fans on our Facebook page. And one of the main reasons why we've been able to do that is because we have people who do nothing but speak back, that actually converse with those fans. Not all 10.6, not all 10.6 even want to talk to you, but the ones that do, you got to engage them. You have to actually speak back and forth to them, and we do. And I think that's where you talk about that intelligent application of limited resources. I would say that is a critical part for all of our brands, is to have somebody who can speak in the tone, the voice, have the heart, the soul, the DNA of your brand, but be able to talk to those consumers every day and learn from them like they are inspired by what you guys do in the brands and the retail things that you do out there.
What's the number one feed you're following on TweetDeck?
Sorry?
What's the number one feed you're following on TweetDeck? Search.
Right now, I'm pretty focused on House of Vans. So House of Vans is a concept that we started 2 years ago in Brooklyn, New York. That's an umbrella for live brand activation. So we built out this warehouse in Brooklyn where we have skateboarding, live music, art shows, fashion shows. Basically, the pillars of our brand can all come to life in that space. And all of those events are webcast, blogged about on a regular basis. So what we've done now is we've made House of Vans global. So there was just a House of Vans in Hong Kong. There's one coming in Mexico City. And we've set up a House of Vans at a venue called the Mohawk in Austin, Texas for the music part of South by, where we're programming music for 4 days under the House of Vans umbrella. So I'm watching that really closely to see what's going on right now. But I follow Vans Shoes. I follow Steve Van Doren. There's like 10 different Vans search terms on there that are, again, moving in real time, so you can always be at least aware of what people are saying about you out there. Does anybody else have a question, a comment? You guys can argue with me, too. If anybody thought I said something they totally disagree with, please feel free.
I don't know if it's a comment or a question or just, like, conversation.
Okay.
Okay, so...
I'm good with that.
Loved your presentation. I'm totally on point with everything you're saying. And then I kind of got hung up on the part where it's about, investing in the core retailer and how the core retailer will, really support your brand. If you have a core retailer that's really, kind of giving back to the community and doing everything they're doing, and they're just really involved. And then we have a core retailer where I live, K5 from Encinitas. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden they just go belly up. Yeah. Not all of a sudden. It's not nothing's ever all of a sudden. For sure, nothing's. We all know this, okay? Yeah. I know Jurgen. I know the whole deal. But it's like that. It's just crazy to me how it's this. I feel like as an industry, it's a huge topic that we're pushing everybody to go direct, and yet we want everybody to support the core retailer. But I don't know what that balance is, and I just feel like I feel like that's a big issue that never really gets addressed.
Great. What's your name? Jody, thank you for the great question. Did everybody hear Jody's question? Everybody knows about the Jurgen K5 example. It was sad for a lot of us to hear that kind of a foundational San Diego, North County retailer closed up shop recently, and she's asking about, when you see things like that happen, why is that happening? Is things like selling direct, are those actually taking some of the best indie retailers out of the business? And the answer is that that market forces have caused contraction in our business. There's no way around that. There's no way around that. And the independent wholesale board sports retailers that are doing exceptional work will survive and they will prosper. That's what my hypothesis is. That's my educated guess into the future, is that those will prosper. Now, I can't get into the specific reasons why Jurgen's specific thing failed, but in general, I would say that the true independent destination, so a true destination independent retailer, how do you define that? Will you go past, as a consumer, will you go past 5 other doors that sell the same thing to see this shop? That's your destination. For the retailers in the room, is your shop a destination? Will a consumer go past 5 other retailers selling the same product to end up in your door? Then you're creating a destination. You're creating that sense of place. The reason why I advocate selling direct, I advocate selling direct for everybody. The retailers, the brands as well, because I think that our job is to meet the expectation of the consumer, and the consumer expects it when they want, how they want it, where they want it. That's the expectation of the consumer today. And if you do not meet that expectation, they will go someplace else. So that's the market forces at work today. So how do you meet that consumer expectation of giving them what they want, where they want, when they want it if you don't sell direct? I don't see how you can do that. At the same time, as an industry, I feel we have a responsibility to overinvest with the true destination independent wholesale retailers, because they represent the culture of our brand. Like I said, a kid who buys something on Amazon and has shit break, where does he end up? He ends up back at the good shop where they know how to deal with it. All the retailers in the room know exactly, this happens to you guys every day, right? We have to do more to support those people. And I'm asking the people in the industry, what's next? How do we move this forward? You guys are going to be talking about this for the next 2 days. Over-investing with those destination accounts that you believe in, that your brand believes in, I think is really what's critical.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly what I was going for, is just throwing that topic out there, because I think it's super relevant, and I feel like it's not always a topic on a roundtable or a discussion or a seminar, and it needs to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I put it in there. Absolutely. Thanks. Jay?
You had a point in there that I'm remembering that was specific to maybe engaging people or bringing people into like a real experience. Maybe I'm filling in your words, but that's what I took from it. My question to you is related to what Jody had here, sort of reconciling, number one, sell direct, to that point. They're dichotomous, and I can't reconcile them, and you've said it pretty well, like, I don't really know how. She said it well, said this is often ignored. It's been my burr under my saddle for 10 years. Okay. And there's nobody's ever come up with how you can't have your cake and eat it too, is the reality of it.
The way that I would answer your question is by my comment, my slide here about storytelling. I feel like when you sell direct, you have an obligation to tell the breadth of the story about what it is that you're selling, and not just creating a commodity that is purely transactional. And I think that what you're talking about is when selling direct becomes purely transactional. Remember, I asked you guys to try to differentiate selling from storytelling. That's exactly to what you're talking about. If I can sell direct but build fans for my brand, I believe it's going to benefit your business as well. I believe I'm going to drive my business globally, and all the accounts that carry my product are going to benefit from that too. But by showing the full breadth of my offering and telling the relevant stories around it, not just putting the half cab in every colorway we have on there, but helping the kid understand that Steve Caballero built the first shoe ever for the specific act of skateboarding and why it is such and why it has stood the test of time. I feel like if I'm creating fans for the half cab, it's going to benefit your business long term. Even though I have to, in order to meet consumer demand, I have to give the consumer the choice whether they want to buy now, remember that they like that shoe, or find a retailer near them. And we're fine being agnostic and saying we're going to let the consumer decide what they want, but we feel an obligation to give them all of those choices. But I feel like your point, what I would really say is people who sell direct have to take on the responsibility for our industry of not allowing the product to become a commodity. And when you focus on price first, when you focus on free shipping first, you're commoditizing our industry. And that's where I think direct really falls down. If you sell direct, you have an obligation to the same storytelling that goes into the core shops and the way that they think about it, right? To me, that is the real challenge. That's the Amazon. The Amazoning of our world is the lowest common denominator. Again, I use the Britney Spears album example. It's the race to the bottom. The race to the bottom is plasma TVs, okay? We're all fans of nice plasma TVs, right? Everybody tries to have a big flat screen in their house. What happened to plasma TVs? When they first came out, the real connoisseurs of AV were into plasma TVs. They looked at all the pioneers. Remember those first pioneers? The black frame, like some people kicked down 10 grand for one of those things. People really loved the beauty of what a plasma TV offered. What happened? What happened? What's the number one selling plasma TV brand in the world today? Vizio. Who said Vizio? Friend of Costco right there. Costco got in the business, and Vizio became the number one selling brand. And when you look at the hockey stick of the selling price of a plasma TV, it's going like this, it's going like this, and all of a sudden it goes like this, and now it is this. You can't make any money selling plasma TVs anymore. Your margins are pennies on a plasma TV. What if that happened to our boots? What if that happened to our bindings? What if that happened to our boards? It's up to us to prevent that from happening, and we prevent that from happening by creating brand affinity and those emotional connections that we talked about through storytelling. So to me, that's the lesson of what you're saying. Selling direct comes with that same obligation that opening a good shop does. If you open a shop and it's kind of half-assed and you think you're in business but you're not, and you think you have a chance to make a quick buck, and you put up a bunch of slat wall and a bunch of rounders, okay, you've been in those stores, you know what I'm saying, right? The ones that invest in actually being true to the sport and the culture, that's what matters. And whether you're online or whether you're in a brick and mortar channel, you have that same obligation to storytelling and representing our culture and our sport in the way it deserves to be represented. So I hope people buy that. I hope people buy into that concept. Oh, sorry. Arn.
So how do you take your creativity and your passion as a leader in your organization over 20 years, where you have this very youthful experience, and what do your staff see in you as a constant message that you're giving out to them in order to continue this? And then how do you stay fresh when you've probably heard more than just a couple of times an idea that you tried 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, and there's somebody new on the block who's coming in and trying to rehash that. So I just wonder, how do you transfer your essence into your staff, and what if I interviewed a staff person, what are they hearing as your consistent message of staying powerful and convicted?
It's a good question, Arn. You'd have to ask them. There's a few of them here. They'll tell you that I'm actually a royal pain in the ass, and they really don't listen to me very much at all. So a few things that I think come to mind right away, and I'll just put them out there. The first thing is that Steve Van Doren set this principle in our company that if you do not roll up your sleeves and get in with everybody else, you do not deserve a seat at the table. And so in our company, there is no room for people who are willing to do their job from a desk. And so I traveled 150,000 air miles last year as a result of that commitment to the company and to the principles that Steve set. And I think that the other Vans people here will tell you that they have similar experiences of just the do whatever it takes mentality in the company. I think that's a very powerful lesson that the Van Doren spirit brings to what Vans is. The second thing I would say is that being out there, when you do have to roll up your sleeves and go out there, then when you're in the mix, you're always ideating, you're always thinking, you're always regrowing your passion. It's when you move away from being out there that you start to lose it. You got to avoid the desk jockey. You got to avoid the mold that grows on your seat when you sit still for too long, you know? And I think being out there just fuels so much passion in what we do. We spend so much time activating our brand. The culture of Vans is also a very grassroots, hand-to-hand, event-based thing, which I think Steve also brought to our company. And so by definition, we're spending so much time out with the consumers, hand-to-hand. You know, how many times have you seen that dude cooking a hot dog? It's crazy. But the reason why is not the hot dog, it's the time he gets to spend with all the kids and remaining connected that I think we've all kind of really learned from that experience. The one other thing I would add that I think is great takeaway for everybody in this room that actually VF taught me, not Vans, the company that owns Vans taught me, is to go outside. If I could fault action sports, and so I run the Surf Industry Manufacturers Association, the trade group for surfing, and they're just as guilty, so it's not just a snowboarding thing. The one thing I could fault the whole industry for doing is being too insular. As an industry, we actually breathe each other's air way too often. right? We blow sunshine at each other way too often. And that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We'll be on the porch with a banjo in the rocking chair pretty soon and married to our sister if we keep this up. You know what I'm saying? That inbreeding is really, it's not good. So one thing that the VF culture teaches you is to go outside. It's a premise that we use quite a bit, to go outside. And so we are always challenged as leaders in the inside of our company to look outside of action sports for things we can bring back in. So to me, I talked earlier about marrying up what's in your gut and your instinct, which is so powerful, along with what you can learn outside through data, through other resources. I think going outside really applies to that. So when I go to South by, I don't just look for all the shit that's about punk rock, heavy metal, and skateboarding. I look for the stuff that's way outside my comfort zone. I went and listened to this guy, Stephen Wolfram. Does anybody know who Stephen Wolfram is? Stephen Wolfram, yeah, I know Kelly does. I was telling her about this. Stephen Wolfram is the leading computational mathematician in the world today, and I suck at math. I was a journalism major, for God's sake. I always wanted to be a writer, right? But I went to that thing to go outside and see what I can learn from the leading mathematician in the world. And I think we all have to challenge ourselves to go outside to look for influence. Don't just compare your brand to other brands that are exactly like you. Don't look for the brands that are just like yours. Don't look for the shops that are just like yours. Look way outside. If you run a core snowboarding shop, what can you learn from the Gap? I mean, that's going to feel like really uncomfortable at first. You're going to be like, that shit sucks. I can't stand that place. But what can you learn from them? And I think that going outside has really helped expand what we're capable of. And I think this industry, all of it, all the board sports could learn perhaps from spending a bit more time outside of ourselves, outside of our comfort zones.
Is that me?
Yes. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
No problem. So, what are your comments on the fact that, and I say this a lot at some of these gatherings, the changing demographics of the U.S. and the fact that the Caucasian population is declining and the Hispanic and African American and Asian populations are increasing. And I don't see too many people of color in this room, and I'm just wondering, what can this industry do to better attract within itself and outside itself a broader spectrum of the population?
Okay, so I have two answers to that. My first answer is that I am in no way, shape, or form equipped to answer that question. I have no education or background, and I cannot speak authoritatively on any of that. So with that caveat said, because I have the microphone, I'll give you my 2 cents. My 2 cents is that we need to do that by ignoring it. I feel like one thing I always loved about snowboarding compared to some of the sports I grew up with, which were primarily skateboarding and surfing, is that women were always a part of snowboarding from the very beginning. Like, it was always a great part of snowboarding to me. And some of you guys have been around for longer, can speak to this too. But I always loved that part that snowboarding had, that it just attracted and welcomed more females into the mix and looked at them and enjoyed what they brought to the sport. And didn't really say like, oh, that's good for a girl. And surfing, man, that was all it was. In skateboarding, there's no such thing as girls when it comes to the actual active skateboarding. But in surfing, it was just this macho, jock-ridden culture. It still is, to be honest, to a great part, even though there's some amazing female surfers out there. But snowboarding always had more open-mindedness to it. It's like this great snowboarder, Mark Frank Montoya, and I used to always have these conversations about this because he comes from like the inner city of Denver and always talked about that life and growing up Hispanic and snowboarding and all that stuff. And for him, it was way cooler to just be a part of a crew that didn't see any difference than to one that played to the differences. So my gut instinct tells me that things like accessibility, I showed the picture of the little girls who were all stoked to be out snowboarding that day. To me, I think that's the answer. I don't think it's about saying, well, what do we do to bring more African Americans or Hispanics, or we're aging older, what do we do to bring more young people in? To me, that's not how I would approach it. I would approach it by saying it's all good. If you have the potential to be interested in snowboarding and be emotionally connected by snowboarding, then we should be blind to that other thing, and we should find a way to bring you in and welcome you into our culture. So I'm sorry I don't have a better answer, but that's my That's my 2 cents. I think we have a pretty open mind about it. That's one thing I like about snowboarding. It seems to be pretty open to that. Other questions, comments, arguments? Nobody wants to argue?
Go ahead. I think your presentation is spot on, and it's great. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
It's on point and it's succinct, which is nice. But also, this is an industry conference. It used to be called TransWorld Industry Conference. It's now a Snow Conference. And I think that your points, I mean, as brand people, we shouldn't necessarily be trying to learn how to better our own personal company here. Hopefully we know how to do that, or we probably shouldn't be here. But how do we apply the same things to the brand of snowboarding? Because that's where I think as a brand, we've lost our way, lost our identity. I think each brand trying to sell its own personal vision and story is important, but a rising tide raises all boats. And the fracturing of the brands against the retailers, against the resorts, is very dangerous when we're then going out to the market with very different messages. And my hope for this meeting, and I haven't been here since, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago was the last TransWorld Industry Conference, but I saw the agenda and we see the statistical data. This is an important meeting to be together and to put our
No pressure, Kelly.
brands aside and work together as an industry collective, resorts, retailers, and brands, to define the brand of snowboarding, not our own personal brands. And how do we, to what you said, we are a very insular group, and we need to go beyond that. When you look at the statistics of iPhones or GoPro, an industry, a product which is effectively the size of our industry, we need to definitely change the way we are operating. We have a glass ceiling that we have not pierced in 20 years. I think Dave Ray is here, and a couple of years ago, him and Dave Ingery were at my office and said that the open-to-buy dolls really shuffled around at different brands, but hadn't really changed in 20 years. I've looked at the industry, or the buying, the media kit, for Snowboarder and TransWorld, and when I was buying my retail store, more than 15 years ago, the subscription base was effectively the same as it is today, so the acquisition and attrition rate is the same. We're bouncing up against a glass ceiling as an industry. And so hopefully, as we're not here to just fixate on what are we going to do to go home and make ourselves better to steal market share from the next guy while we're on fighting for a bigger piece of a shrinking pie. So I don't know, I just want to say that. So hopefully we're not looking at ourselves, because I didn't come here from my brand, I came here from my industry. So
great, thank you. Good point. Yeah, I'll just share. That was a great comment. Sorry, what's your name?
Anthony.
Anthony, thank you for the great point, and appreciate you offering it. I think the one experience I can share that's analogous to what you're describing is with SEMA. Like I said, I've had the opportunity to serve as the president of SEMA for the past 4 years, and I've seen the surf industry's effort to get behind that rising tide mentality, and I think it does actually make a difference. The surf industry's got plenty of problems, believe me. I mean, go look at what's going on with Quicksilver and Billabong and Volcom as an example. But when we sit around that table in the board meetings once a month, and it's the leaders, it's leadership from all the major brands, small to large, talking about what we can do to make the industry better, I feel good about the future of surfing. And I don't know if that forum exists in snowboarding, but I would say that something like that, really has a lot of potential. In skateboarding as well, IASK is the skateboarding equivalent, and I've been working with their executive director to help him understand how to build that as well. But something action sports doesn't have enough of, so thank you for making that point. I think it's a very good one. All right, was there any more questions? I've taken a lot of time. Well, thank you guys so much for the opportunity to talk to you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Doug, for the food for thought and the compelling questions that we're going to be facing and discussing all this week. One of the biggest reasons I was excited to have Doug come and speak to us tonight was not only his ability to really tell a compelling story, but also Van's ability to balance both sides of that tightrope of selling to the masses, being a public company, being global in scale, but also being a darling of especially retailers and supporting them along the way. And snowboarding has gotten to the point these days where it's kind of in an identity crisis, where it needs to, we as an industry need to better define who we are on both sides of that market, who we're telling stories to, from the little kids that you showed there to the core snowboarders. So over the next couple days, look forward to addressing questions from retailers such as these gentlemen and Anthony as far as banding together. So, in closing, I just want to remind you guys that we're going to be going over this evening for a pool party over by the lodge. Tomorrow morning, at the end. Sorry, Stephanie. I always blow that one. Go into the inn, get your swimsuits on, grab some towels, get some beers. And tomorrow morning, if you want to do the early ups, it's at 8:15. Be over at Baldy Mountain. Make sure and have your passes with you. The events start tomorrow night or tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. at the Boiler Room. It's about a block and a half out the door over here. All of your materials show you where those are. Really happy to have all you guys here. Thank you so much for attending, and let's enjoy.
Hell yeah. It's called the rim. It's called the rim. Sprinkler room.